Welcome, everyone. I'm Dave Klein. This is the Cymulate Cybersecurity broadcast. As we approach the end of 2022, wanted to take some time to be introspective at the current pressures that is on industry today, on the people, on the businesses themselves, get into looking forward to 2023 and things that we could do differently, things that we could do in a better fashion. I want to also talk about mega trends in technology that will affect cybersecurity and looking forward to what best practices are in 2023. And there's one person I know who has spent a lot of time dealing with this, and especially with some of the future things that are coming up. And I wanted to bring him on this conversation. So I'm here with Chuck Brooks. How you doing, Chuck?
Great, David. It's great to be here again.
Awesome. So I thought we would start looking at 2022 from a digital transformation perspective. And one thing that was very evident to me this year is how cybersecurity is truly something that's business impactful for any industry, from a Fortune 10, 100, 1,000, all the way down to a candy shop you may own in Peoria, Illinois.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit it on the nose right here, because it's really transformed a lot, largely because of we were forced to go remote and hybrid because of COVID. But businesses all of a sudden found themselves, in a different situation where if they're, particularly if they're small or medium businesses, where they didn't have really the expertise in house, or if they're larger business where they had the expertise in house but no longer because they're over at their own home office. And so it disrupted the ecosystems in a big way. Criminal hackers took advantage of it, attacks up 300%. But the good news on this all is that we decided, we started to see all these vulnerabilities, and business started to wake up. I think it was a wake up call, and they all started to realize, we're moving into a different era. It's not the same old business as usual. And, we used to look at security and cybersecurity as just sort of, a cost item. We don't really need that. But now they've changed that viewpoint, largely because of the switch from criminal activity to brick and mortar to digital. And they realize that their reputations and their well-being are really at stake. So I think it's interesting to look back and see what's happened over the past 2 years. And it's really a different landscape now.
I would agree. And I would say, even talking to my friends, being in cybersecurity, I get this all the time, but I can tell you this year, I heard more about business email compromise, and friends of mine, I have a friend who owns a law firm, was like, we were shocked. We sent an invoice out to the wrong account, right? And we had to go to the bank and get the money back. Another friend who is at a computer science corporation, same thing, right? So there, to me, what was interesting was I also heard a lot from my friends this year about how much the increase in attacks have occurred this year because of the fact that we're working from home, we're working remotely, we're in front of our screens, and we're clicking on things and stuff like that, which is very interesting. That kind of stuff.
And business, email exploitation was a huge part of this. I mean, they've targeted business emails on purpose because they're easy to do. There's a lot of commingling of the business items in your personal computing and phones, and they took advantage of that. And then a lot of them added ransomware attacks, at least very focused ones. So you saw a lot of industries, particularly healthcare and education and some of the financial advisory groups, being targeted very quickly and easily by criminal hackers.
Yeah. And so in looking at all the things that have occurred this year and stuff like that, and looking towards the workforce, how are we going to secure this workforce?
Well, there's always, every year I hear, we need more people in cybersecurity. There's millions of openings. It's a global issue. It's a problem. Every year they try something, whether it's STEM, whether it's trying to cross-train people. It all helps, but it's just not enough. And the reality of cybersecurity is that, we're playing defense. And the hackers have a lot of options, a lot of attempts. They only have to get lucky once or twice to breach. And so what we have to do is we have to play a smart defense, and that means using automation. It means also testing and seeing where your vulnerabilities are repeatedly, because threats morph, and we're all in the same boat. We're all vulnerable. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Doesn't matter how many tools you have, there's a lot of sophisticated actors out there that want to do harm.
In some ways, in looking at this and looking at the overwhelming number of attacks and things like that, and things that we have to defend, you talked about automation and stuff like that. I'd like to go into that in more detail. In some ways, we're not going to have, the cavalry isn't coming, meaning that there isn't going to be all of a sudden a huge growth in people in cybersecurity. I wish there would be, by the way. People out there go into cybersecurity.
Yeah.
A lot of money in cybersecurity, by the way. You always will have a job. But with that said, with that advertisement said, is there really seems to be a different way that we need to attend to everything we're seeing in the field, right? There needs to be an automation so that we can sit here and focus on what's more important, right? What's more important, and have some kind of way of automating the more mundane kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like it mirrors business with robotic process automation. When you don't have the people, you try to automate those things you can do well. And one of the things you could automate, there's several things. There's obviously threat intelligence. You could look for misconfigurations too in testing and penetration testing, and you can do simulation. And I think the combination of them all is a good way to go. I mean, you really have to be comprehensive and holistic to meet all these threats, because there are threats that may be innate in your when you're in your coding. It may be an insider issue that you didn't realize, or it may be a very sophisticated.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that said, there's
capabilities.
Yeah. And with that said, there's also room for AI in this too, right?
Especially room for AI. It's right now predominantly machine learning, because it really looking for patterns. But we're moving it quicker. People didn't realize, that a lot of these emerging technologies would expand in capability so quickly. Even quantum's down, not so far off. But artificial intelligence has a lot of dimensions to it, but it's getting better and better. It's actually writing its own algorithms right now. So it does have an impact on analytics, and it has a big impact on being able to recognize vulnerabilities and threats. And so this type of automation through AI is critical. And I recommend this for any business. And there's vendors out there. There's a lot of places you can look at, but AI is here to stay for cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And again, it's the idea of automating the mundane, be able to prioritize what you're going after. What is the next thing to look at that is most important for you? And you talked about attack simulations. At Cymulate, that's what we do. And for me right now, I'm compiling an end of year report of the last 2 years of our customers doing millions and millions of tests. And the beauty is I'm starting to see a pattern where I'm really kind of getting how this technology and automation really helps out. For example, looking at what my customers have done the last 2 years, it counts to millions of hours of testing. But the cool part is they're not sitting there and watching the screen the entire time. They're just setting things off in a continuous fashion. And then they're being alerted to the most prioritized things. If there's something that's low, they don't worry about it. Here's the 5 high things that we saw. Your EDR needs more tuning. Your email gateway is not catching the common file attachments we see with ransomware. Your applications are allowing SQL injection or cross-site scripting. So the beauty is that the idea of this automation also means you could be more comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, automation and simulation really play a significant role in finding the gaps. And once you find those gaps, the ones you just mentioned, and there are many more, you're able to develop a strategy or a risk management approach to them to deal, like you say, where you can categorize, you can prioritize what's more important to you. And every business may be different. There may be sensitive data that you want to have access to, by certain people or companies, but you have to develop a plan around that, and you can continually test, which is a nice thing about simulation. And you should be doing continual tests and penetration testing and simulation regularly, because like you don't know what you may discover, and you can't assume that you found every gap every time. But the other part it does, it also trains the people. Your team becomes educated, and it's not just the cyber people; it's everyone involved in the company. And they understand, they get a grasp of what the threats are, the grasp of the implications, what it means if this happens, and they're able to develop incident response plans to it too. So, I'm a real big fan of simulations.
Yeah, and what's really cool too is, and you mentioned something that's really kind of important. It's just not the cybersecurity staff; it's the IT staff and DevOps and the business. right? So the big thing is, as we see the digital transformation being so important for most industries today, businesses saying, this is business impactful. I need to work with my cybersecurity staff so they understand what a business down situation is, right? It's a situation where this is going to cost us more money than anything else. And I need to understand what risk we have inherently in a business impactful kind of way. So what's neat to see, I think this is one of the big points, I think, of 2022, is I really started to see cybersecurity professionals really becoming savvy on business terminology for their business, understanding what is important, what is the crown jewels, what would cause them the most business impact. I'm starting to see them also in working, especially with testing simulation, working with the IT and DevOps team, learning truly what shift left means, what CI/CD pipelines mean, learn how certain applications can be changed or cannot be changed, right? And so the key there, there's a combined language of cybersecurity, IT, and business that really is coming about, which is a positive trend.
Yeah, I mean, you're really talking about a mesh, and that
Yes.
is what's happening. And this mesh is expanding, and it's really becoming part of the C-suite, and particularly in a lot of larger companies. Now they've recognized the value of it, particularly from not just from a cost perspective, but you said from a reputation perspective.
Yes.
And the reality is that after we saw Colonial Pipeline go down and implications for critical infrastructure, some of these companies were just forced to say that was pretty easy for them to do. They took out IT and OT and just to fish. So it's a ransomware issue. So if that could happen to them, it could happen to us. And so I think a lot of the C-suite has looked at that, and they've empowering employees by understanding the importance of cybersecurity. But like you said, it's a two-way street. You're also learning the business, because the end mission of the business is usually revenue generating and also expansion and being able to go into new areas and make your employees and your customers happy. So I think by having the security part automated and tested and refined continually makes that other part of it, the work, much easier.
Agreed. So to summarize, the automation's key, the continuous testing, the bringing AI and machine learning, having them speak more than just cybersecurity speak, getting into the business, getting into DevOps and IT speak as well is kind of critical. So the next big thing is, as we said, there is no cavalry coming of experienced employees. We need to take care of who we have, right? Yeah. And we just did a survey at Cymulate of 1,009 professionals. And what we found out was quite interesting. And actually the results came out today. You can go to the website and take a look. But one of the things that was really interesting is we looked at the Great Resignation. So what is that? So the Department of Labor came up with this term, Great Resignation, and found, as we were talking about, the transitions from 2020 to a hybrid work environment. Some people are like, you know what? I'm under a lot of stress. I'm going to change my career. I'm going to change what I'm doing. And what we found was in cybersecurity, they had double the Great Resignation rate of other fields. And it gets worse, Chuck. It gets worse. If the even though that people in cybersecurity are used to working with labor shortages and reduced staff, if that reduction gets to the point where critical positions are missing, it quadruples the average rate of the Great Resignation. So there's a lot of stress on these cybersecurity professionals. What are some of the ways we could take care of them?
Well, you said the first part is the important part, which is getting more help. If you can't do it through people, again, you do it through automation, and that is very viable. The second part is, I think you really have to elevate the role of a cybersecurity professional. For too long, it's been at the bottom of the ladder. Way below in the CIO IT shop. Sometimes just someone that comes in. Right now, it's a specialty profession. This is something that in an interconnected world affects every single industry, every government, and every person, like you say, who's going out there working in the gig economy. So once you have that understanding of the value of why cybersecurity is such an important endeavor, I think you're going to attract more people, at least in that sense. But I think you're also going to have businesses, basically pay them more, value their service more. And, I think you're going to get a lot of people, hopefully, from when they retire from the military, who have been trained in some of these areas that can now come into industry. So I think we need to revitalize that pipeline. But again, it's not going to be a quick fix. We need to rely on a combination of this automation and recruiting new people, particularly a younger generation that may have experience in other kind of capabilities like gaming. Usually make great cybersecurity people. We just need to really make it something that's fun and more attractive for industry and people to go into, particularly the younger generations who think a little bit differently and behave a little differently than in the past, as every generation is a little different. But particularly now, and particularly under the consequences of what happened with COVID-19, I think you have to look at all these different opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. But when you talk about attracting talent, I think what's also important is, and I've been beyond raising salaries and things like that, is when you look online at some of the requirements that people want in the field, it kind of scares people away. And I feel that in this industry, and you talk about certain groups that are predisposed for cybersecurity. Gaming is a perfect example. You mentioned that. And beyond gaming, you have the people who come from the Defense Department, right? And I did 10 years of U.S. federal customer work. And I'd say I could flip a coin, literally, like half the staff had come from a prior DoD roles. And it's kind of an environment that, lends itself to cybersecurity. And I've always found some of the best professionals came from the DoD department. You got Dr. Chase Cunningham, for example.
He's great.
He came from the Defense Department, among other people. So the key is, I think that's one thing, is looking towards veterans, looking at people in gaming. And I think what's also kind of important to tell this new younger generation is they think, oh, it's heavy coding and programming. No, not necessarily. It could be a forensics. It could be all sorts of other things, right? And it's quite a diverse group of people. And then I think that's going to be very important to take chances in hiring.
I think so too. And I mean, you said it's not just that, it's even sales and marketing and business development. All those aspects are heavy in cybersecurity. But you're right. I think, like you said earlier, some of the requisitions I've seen from human resources are too comprehensive. I mean, they ask for all these certifications and experience and degrees, and I think that's problematic. And I think most businesses, when they look back, they think that's problematic too, because they want to actually train people that fits their company strategies and the way they do business. And everyone isn't the same. So it's good to have these credentials, absolutely, but you don't need to have so many to really go into the field. And I think it would be, behooves a lot of the human resources industry to sort of make these much more generic and broad to attract more people, because they put things out there that even an experienced CISO who's running a large agency sometimes wouldn't qualify for an entry-level job. It's just crazy the way they have them. So I think that needs to change.
I agree with that 200%. And you think about, and also, I think that the other thing that this comes into is you can't expect these people to have the certifications and everything up front, but there really needs to be a different attitude to the workday. And that the idea is learning as you go. And it's going back to that whole idea of automation and continuous testing and things that you could do to help with that. There's a point here about the solutions too. They need to be able to be educating as people go along, right? They're able to look at the results of an attack and see, and have the vendor provide all sorts of very specific details about MITRE and what this means, so that they can learn as they use the tools to do that. And on top of that, it means we need more training for these people as well.
Yeah, and I think we just mentioned with the MITRE and also with NIST. I mean, there's a lot of formulations and risk management profiles you could follow and learn from that are not all that complicated to learn if you really pay attention to them. You don't have to have a PhD in computing science. It's just something that you can do, and I think it's reasonable. And I think when you're looking at any company, if you're looking at a healthcare company, you're facing different challenges. You're in a finance company. You may have overlapping systems and networks. You have people coming in and out. You don't have doctors and nurses that know anything about IT. So every situation is different. And I think, what you said about, learn as you go along is really important. I think you need, obviously, someone experienced to lead the team, but you need someone to be able to adapt and find out, ways to do that. And as we're seeing in cybersecurity, things are changing so fast. The tools out there and the solutions and the products and the services, and a lot of managed services are just starting to evolve now. So I think we have to, I think it's almost more important to know what's out there and know what tools you need to use than it is to have a background in coding, because
Correct.
these companies have invested a lot in R&D, and there's some interesting ways of doing it. The problem is that if you don't know how to orchestrate, you're in a problematic area because you really have to have an understanding of what does what and why and what you need and what you don't need. And that is not necessarily taught in any course.
Agreed. A coding course is very different than business dynamics, user experience, being able to convey things in a business way, in a technical way, in a DevOps way, and how do I take these things and put it together to prioritize and reduce my risk and things like that. So,
yes.
looking at this problem, one thing that also I think that was really big prior to 2020, and now as we approach 2022 is really coming into the modern day sun, is MSSPs. Yeah. And in the past, there really were MSSPs to automate your help desk for cybersecurity or to be your tier one in the SOC or what have you. It really seems to be now a situation where there are MSSPs that could do anything for you, and it's just what do you want to delegate to them. And I think what's interesting, I think that's could be also part of what we're going to be doing from now on is to help, besides automate and use AI and machine learning and continuous testing, but I think also as part of it is deciding what part of my cybersecurity risk am I willing to outsource.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly important for small and medium businesses, just largely because they first of all, don't have the expertise, but second, they have the budgets. And if you waste money trying to do this internally, sometimes without the knowledge, you're going to end up costing yourself more than you thought. Yeah. So the MSSPs really are of value, particularly in this environment where things are changing so quickly, and they're probably working, like you said, in a lot of different areas, and some that are more specialized than others. So I think it's a sort of a great thing that it's really more of a consulting world application with them, but I think it's the way business is going.
And I agree too. And the key, obviously, your SLAs are extremely important when you have an MSSP about alerting and prioritization, yes, and let me know when, yes, there's a problem. It just can't be a checkbox anymore, right? I think that's a
checkbox. Yeah,
that's a big thing. It's not a checkbox.
Cybersecurity is not about just compliance. Compliance is not security. It really is about knowing the threats and what to do about the threats and how to mitigate them.
So let's do this. So let's talk about the mega trends that we see on the horizon. This is stuff that's going to affect us into the next year and next decade. And there's a number of them. Let's start with quantum computing. Quantum computing should revolutionize the way computing's done.
It will. Right now we're using classical computing, and the capabilities of quantum computing are immensely faster and greater, even more than X-scale computing. So it would definitely revolutionize the ability for data analytics. It also has implications in de-encrypting a lot of data that's been stolen. So there is a race internationally between the West and others like China to get this quantum capability. So it's really important. It's going to dominate the Industry 4.0. In another decade or so, and the amount of money being put into it is really astronomical right now. And also, if you look at the Department of Defense, you see that they've already put requirements on having quantum-proof algorithms. So it's a serious thing. It's early stages, but it's a complicated thing because it's really done with material science. It's done with physics, but it really does upend the model we're using now for computing, and it's a natural in our progression.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on the main point. The first place where we're going to feel this in cybersecurity is in the breaking of encryption, right? Yes. And having a quantum proof encryption algorithms. And I know, for example, NIST has come up with a few candidates to be used and stuff like that. And so I think it's really important for the individuals out there to start taking inventory of their own companies' encryption algorithms, what they're using, where they're using it. And so that when it comes time to say, hey, listen, we have our first real quantum computer in the hands of a state actor or in the hands of a criminal actor, it's going to be critical for us to have those algorithms in place that will be helpful.
Absolutely.
The next thing I think is kind of important is when you think about, the evolution of this, right? Steve Jobs and making this our number one computer not our laptop, right?
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. We look at this more than we look at our laptop. The next thing is augmented reality, right? And you and I were talking in the green room before we got on the show about how we can't stand it. All these AR headsets are like, these gigantic goggles with a wire down to your belt. We have a computer on there. But the idea is we're getting to the point where it could be as much as a regular pair of glasses these days. What does augmented reality do to us in the future?
It does. It changes a lot of things. For one thing, with industry, it changes the ability to training, because it makes you and it puts you in a realistic scenario. It has applications, obviously, for education. They're experimenting with that right now, but also entertainment. That's really the breaking ground for a lot of these things. You've seen holographic performers now that are no longer around but are still performing. So it's going to change the world. Virtual reality and augmented reality are slow to the gate, but there's a lot of interest in there, and I think there's a connectivity to it, to the metaverse too. You'll be seeing that, and there's a reason that there's so much investment going in there, because people think, 20, 30 years from now, that's where everything's going to be. So I don't see how, but they know more than I do, I guess. But billions and billions are being spent on that, and it has commercial applications, obviously. So we're going to be really engulfed in augmented reality in the near future.
I'd argue in 5 years' time, you and I will be doing these broadcasts, and instead of appearing on people's screens, we'll appear as if we're sitting on a lounge chair with a fireplace in the background, and we're in the room with them.
In
right?
the room.
They'll hear the crackle of the fire as we sit there and tell them what we're talking about, and maybe even interact in a way. So it's almost like a live environment. So that is going to happen. Also, I think the big thing with augmented reality is when you take data and you put it into a 3D space, you have a better ability to grasp it and understand it. So I think that what's going to be interesting is I also predict that AR will become part of threat hunting and cybersecurity, and that is, if we're looking at details of an enterprise, we'll almost like be in a room, and there'll be a big board in front of us with different. So a 3-dimensional board is much easier to understand than a 2-dimensional Splunk alert board. So I think that's going to happen.
And you could create ultra realistic realities and
yes.
see how to respond and train people. So it's going to be pretty cool.
Yes, that too.
For submariners and anyone you think about, this is going to have strong applications.
Think also about the next one is deep fakes. And you think about the fact that this year email business compromise, EBC, was so huge, right? Impersonating an executive saying, hey, I need the invoice changed this place here, which is actually a criminal bank, right? How does deep fakes affect us in cybersecurity?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to see it's already been used in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. A deep fake of President Zelensky came out, produced by the Russians. Luckily, that everyone knew it was fake, but it looked like him. It sounded like him, and it was him, but just manipulated. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think it's problematic because you may be impersonated and have identity theft become a bigger issue now than it is already. But it's if you look back at some of the spoofing that's been used in the past, look how far we've come with just email, like business emails. You see stuff, you used to get stuff with with misspellings on it, from somewhere in a faraway land from some prince. Now you're getting something from your boss that you work for, or your Amazon or your bank that you bank at because of social engineering. They know all about you, and it's difficult to recognize. And then think about if they, when it comes to the point where you have they find your boss and they create a deep fake of him saying that you need to do this, whatever. You could really cause a lot of havoc in the industry in a lot of other places too.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is I think really going to be huge. I think it hasn't been realized yet. Is 5G, right?
Yes.
5G. The claim is eventually we will not have a home router and our own LAN at home, wireless LAN and wired LAN. That we'll have basically just 5G right to our phone provider, right? And the idea, think about that for business. No wide area networks, no gateways, right? Everything becomes 5G. It's almost as if cloud compute comes to network computing, right? The idea is that we're all going through these third parties.
Yeah, it is really computing at the edge, like say, and the amount of power now, like say, in these phones is incredible. more than enough that you can send people to the moon, like they did with those huge computers they used back in the 60s with Apollo. But so it's going to get more and more, and I think it's also largely because of our own habits, like you said earlier. We're on a laptop now, but for most of us now, we're glued to our phones. And if you look at any of the younger generations, their phone is really a part of them. It's how quickly someone responds to their text or a post. Everything that they do is done through their phone. All the information they get in their classes and everything is on their phone. So the next step of that phone will be an implant in us in the not too far future. But all the capabilities we have right now, we could pretty much do on a phone. And like I said, for 5G, the latency issue is not a problem anymore. You can download Encyclopedia Britannica in 2 seconds. And so that changes it. And you obviously can live stream anything and do things that, in real time, which just, if you remember a few years ago, dial up internets, took 5 minutes to get through, and everything to download took hours. So we're moving fast, and 5G is going to definitely be part of that revolution.
Definitely. And a user asked us from LinkedIn, thanks, Dave and Chuck. What are the trends with post-quantum cryptography? Do you think it's something to consider in the future strategy plans? Absolutely. So again, NIST has, and you can go to the NIST's website, a list of post-quantum safe cryptography. They did I think it was over a 2-year study, and they came up with some winners and some candidates that supposedly are going to be post-quantum computing safe. And so definitely check out the NIST site to see what those ones are. And I think we're still in the early phases of having them be adopted by things like OpenSSL and other things like that. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen quickly. And so I would totally think that on your 2023 plan, that's part of it. Doing an inventory of your existing crypto wherever it is, in the applications, in the web interfaces, and all the stuff that you use, and find out, and actually encryption at rest on your laptops and things like that, and to look at those NIST algorithms and see them being adopted by vendors. And also, as part of your RFPs, you need to say, what is your post-quantum cryptography plan, right? So when you're looking at a new vendor, whether it is for SIM or for web gateway or for anything, and even on cybersecurity, what is your post-quantum cryptography plan, right? You want to hear that, hey, listen, we're using the OpenSSL TLS, and we're going to go with whatever they go with, or you're going to hear that we have crypto in this part of my application, and our strategy is to do this, right? So that's a great question. Thank you so much. And someone, a LinkedIn user, also says the next incarnation of the mobile phone are glasses. And yes, when I went like this and said AR, I had totally believed that we will have glasses. And I actually, Chuck and I were talking about this before we came online here. I think it's going to be contacts. I think eventually it'll start off with glasses, and then it'll be contacts. And I think those contacts will be powered by something remote to it. So like a wireless way of powering something. Maybe it'll be in your pocket, but the idea is you'll power those lenses in your eye by that kind of stuff. But the key is that's absolutely what the next smartphone is going to be. It is augmented reality. And thank you, LinkedIn user, for that. Excellent. So in looking at 2023, I have a prescriptive. I'm Dr. Klein. People call me Dr. Klein. The real Dr. Klein is my father. He's retired. He was a professor. My wife is a Dr. Klein as well. She's a professor as well. But people call me Dr. Klein as well. And I definitely have my list of things that, looking at 2023, coming back to best practices, hygiene, people need to do. But I'm going to start with you, Chuck. What do you think people need to do?
You just hit it again. Cyber hygiene. It all starts with that. I mean, you really got to start at the base, and it's being first don't overshare. Have strong passwords, encryption. Get the best military grade encryption you can get on the market. Use encrypt your sensitive data. Third thing I think is that you really want to use multi-factor authentication. I wouldn't even put that third. I think sometimes that's the first thing to deter any hacker that's not very sophisticated. To get around that, it's not easy, and so it's easy for us to set them up. So every employee should be having that. And I think you also have to look at the threat landscape. I said, we're in a new era now, and the threats morph, and that's again where simulation comes into play. But we're seeing a lot more sophisticated ransomware come in, and we're seeing ransomware attached with biometrics, where it releases. So all those problems we're seeing, polymorphic malware, all these things are pretty scary. And so you have to be prepared and understanding. And I think, for everybody, whether they're in cybersecurity or not, I think educating themselves about the basics of cybersecurity and the basics of cybersecurity hygiene is an imperative.
Yeah, agreed. I would say my list is I'd start with multi-factor authentication, which by this point everyone should be doing, which sadly they're not. I think that's really key. On top of that, you hit on something very important. Some of the multi-factor authentication techniques can be broken, right? So the idea of biometrics or hardware tokens are really becoming something that used to be just for, the secret squirrel defense department. If you're running a big firm, you need to have a hardware token as well. So the multi-factor authentication, with the caveat being biometrics and hard-coded, hardware encryption devices with the token, is really becoming important. The idea of least privilege. Right?
Yes, that's really important too. Zero trust. You go back
zero trust.
Yeah,
zero trust.
Who has access to what your data and your network?
Right. This is huge, right? And along with least privilege, better identity access management, right? No one should be logging in as root or admin. People need to be logged in. You know who they are. They just have role-based access control. So, MFA, least privilege, better identity access management, EDR adoption is still not 100%. That is so huge. The idea of signature-based antivirus is not going to work, right? You need to be able to do EDR, behavioral heuristics.
Yes.
I'd argue email and web security, right? That I'm surprised how many people don't have good email and web security or hygiene, with valid certs and DKIM records and things like that, SPF records. But all these kind of things are really critical.
Yeah, you need secure routers, you need strong firewalls. There's so many things, but they're all out there, and
they're all out there.
And then it goes there, what you need to have. Those are the basics. Then how you orchestrate is the other thing. But at least the basics for any small business or individual, they're available, and there's no reason you shouldn't be using them.
Exactly. And then, I think also we look at this, the idea of the cryptography. I think both of us are in agreement that you should start looking at your crypto and see how quantum computing will affect that crypto, because it's going to change. And then finally, I think phishing education. There's some people who are like, you can't educate the end users. It doesn't work. But I think really you need to continue to educate the end users. And that's really kind of
it's a process,
Yes.
and it's just it's really just the adversaries got more sophisticated, and they continue to do so, but so that we have to at least, balance that and train our employees to look for it. And there's everyone can be victimized by a phish, and it's still the number one way of doing a breach. But the more the more at least you'll be, hesitant to open that link or attachment before thinking, maybe that's not what it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great. Chuck, thank you so much for attending today. This has been a wonderful conversation, and look forward to everyone out there. This has been the Cymulate Cybersecurity broadcast. Have a great day.